Imagine stepping out to your front yard with your morning coffee,
Huh?
feeling pretty good about the world, and then you look down and find your prized plants just like shredded into jagged lace.
Oh, it's the absolute worst feeling.
Right. There are no bugs in sight,
Yeah.
no footprints,
Yeah.
just this perfectly executed, silent botanical heist.
Ghost town. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you've ever felt that very specific type of frustration, today is for you. We are putting on our detective hats and jumping into a really fascinating deep dive.
I am so excited for this one. It's a great dispatch from the gardening trenches.
It really is. It's a piece titled Notes on Gardening, Part 954, by an author named Ang. And it was published literally today, July 13, 2026.
Fresh off the press.
Yeah. It belongs to a broader collection called Guardian of the Green, Identifying and Treating Chewing Pests. And I mean, it is essentially a masterclass in decoding those subtle clues your plants leave behind when they're under attack.
It completely reframes how you look at a garden, honestly. You stop seeing it as just this static collection of greenery, and you start seeing it as an active and sometimes pretty brutal ecosystem.
Oh, totally.
And the fact that this is part 954 tells you immediately that this author has been engaged in this long, continuous process of observation. We are getting the distilled wisdom of someone who has failed, succeeded, and documented basically every step of the war for the front yard.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core of Ang's observation starts with a very specific piece of evidence. The text calls it the classic sign of a plant being susceptible to a pest infestation, which is eaten leaves.
Right, missing plant tissue.
Yeah, and if you're anything like me, your first instinct when a plant looks sick is to assume, you watered it wrong or maybe it needs fertilizer.
Ah.
But Ang is drawing a hard line in the sand here.
A very hard line.
We aren't talking about yellowing foliage or wilting or weird spots. We are talking about physically missing leaf material.
And that distinction is the foundational step of any garden forensics. I mean, if a leaf is yellowing, you might be dealing with a nitrogen deficiency or root rot, stuff like that.
Sure, environmental stuff.
Right, or if it's covered in a powdery film, you're looking at a fungal issue. But eaten leaves actual structural damage where the plant's photosynthetic engines have been physically removed that points to a very specific mechanical action.
It requires a mouth.
Exactly. It requires an organism that is capable of biting, tearing, or rasping away tough plant cellulose.
Which brings us to the lineup. Ang immediately provides us with the usual suspects responsible for this kind of damage. It's a very specific list of 6 culprits. We've got caterpillars, beetles, slugs, snails, grasshoppers, and katydids.
The classic chewers.
Right. But I have to admit, seeing katydids on this list really threw me off. Grasshoppers and beetles, sure, they seem obvious. I see beetles lumbering around my yard all the time.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere.
But katydids, they are essentially leaf mimics. I mean, they are practically invisible. So if the only clue we have is the fact that the leaves are half-eaten, how are we supposed to figure out which of these 6 masters of camouflage is actually doing the damage?
Well, what's fascinating here is how Ang uses this specific list to force you, the gardener, to shift your methodology. By giving you those 6 suspects, Ang is telling you to stop looking at the plant itself and start looking for behavioral patterns.
Oh, interesting. So looking at how they act, not just what they look like.
Precisely. Slugs and snails, for example, are mollusks, right? They travel in a layer of slime. You can look for the trails.
Okay, that makes sense.
Beetles have hard exoskeletons, and they often drop to the ground when startled. It's a defense mechanism. Grasshoppers are highly mobile. They jump. Caterpillars tend to just stay on the host plant and methodically eat their way along an edge.
Just munching in a straight line.
Yeah, exactly. When you know the biology of these suspects, you start to realize that the perfectly sunlit daytime garden you are looking at is essentially an empty stage. The actors just aren't there.
Which brings up a massive complication in the text. I mean, we expect to just wander out at noon, find the bugs, and flick them off the leaves. That's the dream, right?
It's the suburban gardening fantasy.
It is. But Ang shatters that illusion completely. The text points out that these pests hide during the day. Their entire survival strategy relies on being completely invisible when the sun is up.
Well, you have to consider the evolutionary pressures on these organisms. For a soft-bodied creature, like a slug or a snail, direct sunlight is absolutely lethal.
Right, they just dry up.
Exactly. It causes rapid desiccation. And for caterpillars and beetles, the daytime is when avian predators, basically birds, are actively hunting.
So it's basically a war zone out there.
Pretty much. The top of a leaf at noon is the most dangerous place in the world for these 6 suspects. So they retreat, they go into the soil, under mulch, or deep into the shaded architecture of the plant itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because they hide during the day, Ang tells us we have to change our own behavior. We have to conduct an actual midnight stakeout.
A midnight stakeout, yes.
The text explicitly says that checking at night is necessary to confirm the presence of slugs, snails, and certain caterpillars because they are strictly nocturnal. So this serene, sunny hobby of gardening suddenly turns into you standing in your front yard at 2 in the morning, wielding a flashlight, looking for snails.
I love that visual, but it demands a completely different level of commitment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The nighttime stakeout is all about direct confrontation. You are trying to catch the perpetrators in the act.
Under the cover of darkness.
Right. When the temperature drops and the sun goes down, the risk of drying out or getting eaten by a bird just vanishes. So the front yard becomes this massive nocturnal buffet.
It's open season.
Yeah. And if you only ever inspect your plants during your daytime routine, you are quite literally operating in the dark. You'll see the escalator damage day after day, but you will never actually cross paths with the organism causing it.
Now, I noticed Ang uses the phrase certain caterpillars when talking about this nocturnal stakeout. It's a very deliberate distinction. It separates them from the slugs and snails, which are, uniformly night dwellers. Why wouldn't all caterpillars just adopt the night shift if it's so much safer?
Because nature rarely deals in absolutes. Some caterpillar species have evolved completely different daytime survival mechanisms.
Like what?
Well, some are toxic, and they advertise that fact with bright warning colors. They want the birds to see them.
Oh, like a don't eat me sign.
Exactly. They don't need to hide. Others are so perfectly camouflaged, looking like twigs or even bird droppings, that they can afford to just sit there and feed during the day.
That is wild.
It is. But the certain caterpillars Ang mentions, the ones that lack those specific daytime defenses, they have to rely on the cover of darkness. It forces you to realize you're dealing with highly specialized survival tactics, not just generic, quote-unquote, bugs.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. What about the listener who simply refuses to roam their neighborhood with a flashlight at midnight? Maybe they work nights, or maybe they just don't want the neighbors calling the police on them for lurking in the bushes.
A fair point. It's not for everyone.
Right. And Ang does actually offer a daylight alternative, but it requires a very different kind of focus. The text mentions a daytime tracking method, basically, checking beneath the leaves for eggs or the pests themselves.
Right, and if you connect this to the bigger picture of the text, Ang is outlining a forensic approach versus an active surveillance approach.
Forensic versus active. I like that.
Yeah, if you aren't going to catch them actively chewing at night, you have to find their safe houses during the day. And the underside of a leaf is a brilliant piece of natural architecture.
It really is the ultimate hiding spot. It shields them from the ultraviolet light of the sun, and it completely hides them from a bird looking down from above. They are basically using the plant's own umbrella against you.
Precisely. The underside of a leaf creates its own microclimate. It's cooler, it's more humid, and it's often textured in a way that allows eggs to be securely attached.
So you can't just casually glance at the garden.
Not at all. When Ang tells you to check beneath the leaves, it requires you to physically interact with the plant in this very meticulous way. You cannot just scan the canopy visually.
You got to get your hands dirty.
Yeah, you have to turn over individual leaves, inspect the veins, look for microscopic egg clusters, or maybe find a katydid pressed completely flat against the stem. It transforms you from a casual observer into a forensic investigator.
So, okay, let's recap where we are. We have our classic sign of eaten leaves. We have narrowed down our 6 usual suspects. We know we either have to ambush them at night or forensically hunt their eggs under the leaves during the day.
We've done the detective work.
We've done the work. We have found the culprits. Now, how do we stop them without nuking the entire front yard ecosystem? Because if I go to my local garden center, there are just aisles and aisles of industrial synthetic pesticides promising instant death to anything with 6 legs.
Oh, it's overwhelming.
But Ang completely bypasses all of that.
Well, the modern instinct is almost always eradication through chemistry. We've been conditioned over the last century to believe that the only good garden is a sterile garden.
Right, a garden with 0 bugs.
Exactly. And people think achieving that requires these broad-spectrum synthetic neurotoxins. But Ang's approach completely rejects that philosophy.
Yes, the text outlines a regular treatment strategy, and the ingredients are almost shockingly simple. Vegetable oils mixed with detergent.
Just household staples.
Just common, everyday items you already have sitting in your kitchen pantry.
So what does this all mean mechanically? How does dish soap and cooking oil take down a grasshopper or a beetle? It is entirely about physical mechanics rather than internal poisoning. To understand why Aang's pantry mixture works, you really have to understand insect biology.
Okay, wait on me.
An insect like a beetle or a caterpillar, they don't breathe through a mouth and lungs like we do. They breathe through tiny pores along the sides of their bodies. They're called spiracles.
Wait, so they essentially breathe through their skin?
In a manner of speaking, yeah, basically. Furthermore, insects have an exoskeleton that is covered in a very thin protective layer of wax, the epicuticle.
A wax layer, okay.
This waxy layer is crucial for their survival because it locks moisture inside their bodies. Without it, a tiny insect would dry out and die very quickly in the open air.
So where do the detergent and the vegetable oil come into play with all of this?
Well, the detergent, the soap, acts as the surfactant. When you spray this mixture on the insects, the soap breaks down and dissolves that protective waxy layer on their exoskeleton.
Oh, wow. So it compromises their primary physical defense.
Exactly. And simultaneously, the vegetable oil coats the insect. Because oil is viscous, it physically clogs those spiracles, the breathing tubes.
That is wild. So it's not a chemical attack on their nervous system. It's a physical attack on their respiratory system.
Yeah.
You're basically suffocating them while simultaneously stripping away their armor.
That's a great way to put it. It is a highly effective, purely mechanical method of pest control. And because it relies on physical smothering rather than a synthetic chemical compound, it leaves no toxic residue in your soil.
Which is huge.
Massive. It doesn't poison the birds that might come along and eat the treated bugs later, and it doesn't require you to wear a hazmat suit to apply it. It is a highly localized, targeted defense.
But there is a very specific catch to this method that Aang brings up. The text explicitly calls this a regular treatment. That word regular feels like a heavy caveat. It implies that this simple pantry mixture is not some magical one-and-done solution.
That is the trade-off. You know, synthetic chemical pesticides are designed to be persistent. You spray them once and they keep killing for weeks.
They stick around forever.
Right. But vegetable oil and detergent degrade very quickly. A heavy rain will wash it right away. Even just a couple of days of intense sunlight will break down the oil.
Okay, I see.
Therefore, to maintain the defense, the gardener has to apply it regularly. It forces an ongoing relationship between the gardener, the plant, and the pest.
And it makes perfect sense when you consider the environment Aang is dealing with. The text specifically mentions the front yard. A front yard is an entirely open system. It is not a sealed, climate-controlled greenhouse.
Not at all.
Even if you go out tonight with your flashlight and meticulously suffocate every single slug and caterpillar on your property with oil and soap, tomorrow morning, a grasshopper can just hop right over the fence from your neighbor's yard and the cycle starts all over again.
Which brings us to the core philosophy of what it means to be a guardian of the green. If you are operating in an open system like a front yard, total eradication of chewing pests is just a myth.
It's a pipe dream.
It really is. It is biologically impossible without destroying the ecosystem itself. By committing to a regular treatment of physical barriers like oil and soap, Aang is actually advocating for a strategy of threshold management.
Threshold management. Explain that for the listener who might be feeling a little overwhelmed at the thought of spraying soapy oil every single week.
Sure. Threshold management means accepting that bugs are going to exist in your garden, and that is okay. The goal is not to have zero caterpillars.
Right.
The goal is to keep the caterpillar population below the threshold where they cause catastrophic, irreversible damage to the plants. You are just trying to give your plants enough of an edge to outgrow the damage.
So a little nibble is fine.
Exactly. A few eaten leaves are actually a sign of a living, breathing ecosystem, but a plant stripped completely to its stem, that is a failure of management.
Got it.
The regular application of Aang's mixture keeps the pest numbers manageable without trying to play God and sterilize the yard.
I really love that perspective. It completely relieves the pressure of perfectionism. You aren't failing as a gardener if you see a beetle. You are just participating in the natural friction of the environment.
Wonderfully said.
And it highlights why the observation part, checking under the leaves, doing the midnight stakeout, is so vital. You have to monitor the population levels to know when it is actually time to deploy the regular treatment. It is a constant calibration.
And that calibration requires immense patience. It demands that you step away from the fast-paced, instant gratification mindset we are all so accustomed to.
Which is hard to do.
It is. But you have to slow down to the speed of a plant's growth and the speed of the snail's migration. You have to let the subtle clues dictate your actions.
Which really brings this entire deep dive full circle. Ang's short dispatch gives us an incredibly practical, empowering blueprint. We start with the classic sign, the missing tissue, the eaten leaves.
Step.
Right. Then we identify the specific physical mechanics of our six chewers.
Yeah.
The caterpillars, beetles, slugs, snails, grasshoppers, and katydids. We adjust our own schedules to their biological rhythms.
Whether that means hunting with a flashlight at midnight or turning over leaves during the heat of the day.
Exactly. And finally, we reject the toxic industrial approach in favor of a democratic, pantry-based defense strategy, using the mechanical properties of vegetable oil and detergent to manage the population rather than try to eradicate it.
It is a remarkable distillation of horticultural strategy. But, reflecting on the mechanics of Eng's method raises a really important question. Something really worth pondering long after you put the gardening gloves away.
Ooh, I am always here for the lingering question. Where does this leave us?
Well, we noted at the very beginning that Eng's post is explicitly labeled Part 954. That number implies a staggering timeline.
Yeah, that's a lot of notes.
It is almost 1,000 documented iterations of trial, error, and observation in this one single front yard ecosystem.
Right, it's like the diary of a very long war.
Exactly. And in this current dispatch, Eng is successfully relying on a regular treatment of vegetable oil and detergent to combat this specific group of chewing insects. But nature is not static. It is incredibly dynamic and relentlessly adaptive.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
If a gardener continually relies on this exact same physical barrier, coating the leaves with slippery oil and wax-stripping soap generation after generation, season after season, how might these usual suspects adapt over time?
Oh, wow. You are talking about forced evolutionary pressure right there in the front yard.
Precisely. If you constantly make the leaves suffocatingly oily, do the beetles eventually evolve to recognize and avoid the scent of detergent?
That's entirely possible.
Do the caterpillars develop a thicker epicuticle that actually resists the surfactant properties of the soap? Do the grasshoppers alter their feeding patterns to only target the newest, untreated growth at the very top of the canopy?
That is wild to think about. We usually view evolution as something that happens over millions of years in isolated environments. But you are pointing out that our own backyard defense strategies are actively participating in natural selection right now.
It is the ultimate biological arms race. The gardener adapts to the bugs by mixing up pantry oils, and eventually the bugs will inevitably adapt to the pantry oils.
They always find a way.
They do. It makes you wonder. By the time Eng reaches Notes on Gardening Part 2000, will everyday gardeners find that their dish soap just no longer works?
We'll have mutant bugs.
Basically, will we be forced to search our kitchens for entirely new, complex mechanical defenses just to maintain that threshold of coexistence?
Man, the botanical heist never really ends. The burglars just learn to pick better locks. It completely changes the stakes of a simple hobby. So to you listening, the next time you walk out your front door and spot a half-eaten leaf, remember that you are looking at the front lines of an evolutionary battle. Grab your flashlight, mix up your detergent, and know that the stakeout is only just beginning.